All right. Hi, everyone. So I'm Angie from New Ventures BC. I am here today with Dave Thomas and Lesley Duncan. They are both with SFU Venture Labs, and Dave Thomas is also one of the partners at Rocket Builders. You may have heard of Rocket Builders through the annual Ready to Rocket list, which comes out once a year as well. So I am going to just share my screen to just go over some housekeeping info, and then I'm going to pass it over to Lesley and Dave, who will take you through the seminar today. And there's still people coming in. So as you all come in, welcome, and we'll keep going here. So, okay, so welcome. This is our first seminar of our series. So as part of the New Ventures BC competition presented by Innovate BC, we really enjoy hosting education series. So it's going to be weekly this year as webinars online. So every week, either today's Tuesday, it's usually Wednesdays, but we throw in the odd Tuesday and Thursday just to keep things interesting. And pretty much every week between now and mid-June, we will have something for you, and everything will be recorded. And everything, the slides will be shared. So we'll send you links on how to access everything post-event as well. So please feel free to just sit back and enjoy, because you'll have access to all the slides and the videos to rewatch, etc., whenever you need. So like I said, we're on March 29th. That's our first of the series. Here is a look at what's coming ahead. I'm looking at this now, and I can already see that we've got more we're adding. So more to be added, but this is just a little hint of what's to come. So yeah, feel free to join us for every week. Feel free to join us for what makes sense for you. Of note is this Thursday, if you're in Vancouver, we are hosting our kickoff in-person networking event. And that's more around the competition. And if that's of interest, please join us. So about New Ventures BC quickly. So we're a not-for-profit society here. Our mission and mandate is to support early stage tech companies. So we do that in a few ways. This education series is part of our annual competition. So it's a $250,000 in cash and prizes competition for the top tech startups. And you can enter that competition until April 11th. So if you're interested in that, or I assume most of you have heard of that already, but if not, our website is newventuresbc.com and all the info is there. A lot of this presentation, for those who are already in the competition or thinking about it, a lot of this presentation, there's a lot of help and overlap with some of the questions we're going to ask you in the competition. So it's kind of doubly helpful in that way. And then the other program I want to just mention, because we just opened applications for it, is our Discovery Foundation Sales Accelerator. So this is an 8-week program, which is independent of the competition. It's for companies that have revenue and want to get more revenue and figure out how to do that. So if that's you, please check out our Sales Accelerator program. I'll put a link in the chat, or Liz, my colleague, will momentarily, and you can take a look at that program too. All right, so just quickly, I'm just going to put this up in case anyone's interested. We just like to post some events we've noticed happening around the community. There's lots more happening. I ran out of time, or I would have added more, but we also post them all in our Slack group. So I'll put a link in our Slack group as well. I believe Dave's going to mention a few of these events anyway, so I'm not going to spend too much time here because I know Dave's going to talk about some of these events as well. So I just want to thank our sponsors, because it's our sponsors that allow us to host all these events and reach out to you. So our lead partner, title sponsor, is Innovate BC. Gold sponsors EY, Fasken, SFU Beauty School of Business, and the UBC Sutter School of Business. Silver sponsors, Acetech, Telus Ventures, Output, Vantec, and Volition. And we all also have these wonderful bronze sponsors here, including SFU Venture Labs, and Lesley and Dave are with us from there today. Oh, media sponsors, I almost forgot. So often we hear about all sorts of great companies happening in the competition, and it's part thanks to our media sponsors here. All right, any questions about everything? Here's how you contact us. Please get in touch anytime, and we'll get back to you. Okay, so that's it. I'm done. Don't want to take up any more time because I want to get on to the main event here. So I'll get Dave or Lesley to share their presentation. So Dave Thomas has been, I think, volunteering for the competition since, is it the very beginning, Dave, or very close to the beginning? And has given a version of this talk in the seminar series for quite a while. And then I think just last year, Lesley, we're really lucky to have Lesley join this this talk as well, and she's sharing her expertise, especially around market research and customer discovery, which is a big part of this stage of the startup world. Oh, gotta mute someone here. Sorry, so yeah. And Lesley and Dave are both from SFU Venture Labs, which is a accelerator here in town that works with growth stage companies. I'm sure they'll tell you more about it. So I'm going to pass it over to Dave and Lesley. But thanks again for being here, everyone.
Great. Thank you very much indeed, Angie. Very pleased to be back. And I think this is the 20th year that I've been part of the presentation stuff at Venture Labs, at New Ventures BC. So very pleased to do that. And also very pleased to have Lesley join me again. She did that last year, and really find that she's an expert in the customer discovery area. And that's something that's really important for everyone. I just want to highlight 3 different events for everybody. We have on Wednesday actually, I think it's Wednesday the 6th, from 3 to 6 p.m. is the Vantec Angel Network. And it is their monthly event, and the focus is clean tech investment. There will be a panel that is put on by Rocket Builders. It'll be Jeff Hansen and myself, with a number of investors in the clean tech space, as well as some companies. We also have market validation training, and Lesley, unless I'm mistaken, I got a typo here, and it should be the 6th, not the 7th. Am I correct?
I believe you are.
Right, so it's Wednesday the 6th, which is just before the clean tech event, is market validation training for a program that Venture Labs will run that starts in early May. So we have an information session. Again, something similar in some respects to the program that New Ventures BC runs. It's a standard early stage company to validate markets for companies. In this case, we will be running it at Venture Labs as an in-person program with all the mentors we have, and looking forward to spending more time talking to people one-on-one. The final thing is a sneak preview of a program we are launching called Office Hours. And Office Hours will work or operate in a number of different areas. One of them is it will look at sales and marketing. It'll look at raising capital. It'll look at HR and leadership. One of the items is the official launch, and our topic is working with large companies. And it will feature speakers from SAP, Microsoft, CGI, which is a large system integrator, and Amazon AWS. And so that'll be Monday the 25th at 4 p.m. In person at Venture Labs. We are just in the process of putting up the landing page to take registration. So if that's of interest, please check back to the Venture Labs website in the next day or two, and there should be additional information available on that program. So just I'd like to keep going if I could, and we'll talk about product market fit. And if you take a look at it, it's a product marketing overview. And really the topic is about product management. It's how do I manage my product in the marketplace? So one of the statements we hear a lot of the time is, as a technology company, you need to manage your product before, during, and after minimum viable product. It has to change as you become more mature, and you have to manage what the market perceives of your product at all times. This is who I am. I got 2 email addresses, Rocket Builders as well as Venture Labs. And Lesley Duncan is with me. Here's Lesley's email address. Also my phone number. You will receive a copy of the slides from Angie and the team at New Ventures BC. So if you're interested in follow on, that's something that we can certainly provide. So Lesley, I'll just do a quick introduction, is the operations director, mentor, and the interim director at SFU Venture Labs. Co-founded a fintech company, over 10 years in market research, UX research, and program evaluation. And she's Dr. Duncan with a doctorate in social psychology. I myself am a mentor in residence, a Venture Connection programs director at Venture Labs. I've been responsible for the Rocket Builders go-to-market and sales programs in BC for over a decade, and they're targeted at growth and scale-up companies. I also teach Introduction to Business and Introduction to Innovation, and I have the numbers at the bottom, which are 4 + 1 + 1, and unfortunately that means I've been part of 6 startup companies, 4 failures, 1 success, and 1 which is still a work in progress. So hopefully it turns out to 4 + 2 rather than 5 + 1. I also have a hobby business. So normally I would ask everybody to put their hand up, but because we're not in person, we're on Zoom. Ask everybody how many of you know how to sail, and if not a lot of people put their hand up, I tell everyone you are missing out. I run the sailing school at Jericho Beach. It's called Max Sailing, and I will use Max Sailing as an example of how every company needs to use the internet to market, and every company needs to message and present itself effectively. So it's something that everybody can understand because it's a B2C company, and it's something that consumers can relate to. Just a quick reinforcement of what Angie said earlier on. April 11th is your registration date, but really the time that's important for everybody is when you go into round 2. So in May, there's a whole series of things that are asked of you to present your company profile in more detail. And one of the key things we will do today, as well as talk about product market fit, how do you address the market and do research, we'll try to help you understand the information you need to answer a number of the questions that are about your company and how you will succeed in the marketplace, and therefore how you will do well in the New Ventures BC competition. There are baseline info, 4 different topics, and there's a lot of things like what's your company, what do you do, where are you from? But there are also 4 questions, and 3 of them are about the market, and 1 of them is about revenue and how you will make money. So one suggestion I'd have is the jury is hoping for concise, consistent answers where all of the pieces blend together effectively. A lot of it comes back to the business model canvas. I'm not sure how many of you have done a business model canvas, or more importantly, how many of you have updated your business model canvas in the last month. As we come out of COVID and things change, and things are changing a great deal, it's relatively important to understand where you sit, and the business model canvas is a foundational piece that will help you. It's one of the things that you can submit when you enter the New Ventures BC competition. So 3 most important questions, in my opinion. One of the ones, or some of the ones that you need to answer is, how will you win in the marketplace? It's not just, here's the market, here's my company. You have to say, why am I going to blend them together? How am I going to win? And then it's more than just the product and the fact that there is that market. How will you move into the market, and how will you migrate and address different parts of the market, including where will you start? And when you show numbers in your presentation, let's just not see a large graph with a big, huge number at the end. Show us the revenue model. So somebody who's on the jury or someone who's looking at your company is interested in it can understand how you got to that number. In other words, how did I predict revenue? What's the algebra and what's the formula that is in behind it? So one thing I would also say is, when you're submitting for round 2 or maybe round 3 or others, if you're not sure exactly how to answer a question, don't be afraid to say, here's my best answer, but it's also a work in progress. And if you're having trouble understanding what the answer might be, go back to the business model canvas. It quite often has the answers to the questions that you're having difficulty with. One other comment I get a lot of the time is people have difficulty getting down to 5 pages. Make the assumption that you're dealing with a sophisticated audience in New Ventures BC. A lot of the people who are jury members or mentors or other things have been around a lot. You do not have to explain how things work in detail. Tables in point form quite often impart information really well. Talk mostly about your company and how you will succeed in the market, rather than the fact that it's a huge, huge market. It's more important to say, what will I do to be a consistent and important player in the market, than to say it's just big. So some of the different topics that are there: market research and segmentation, understanding customers. We'll talk today a bit more about what's a whole product solution. How do I position my product, and the metrics. And what we're really trying to help you with is, in your second submission, one that's a little bit larger, we're trying to help you answer questions 1, 2, and 3. And each one of the sections of this webinar should have some background information that should help you with answering the questions that are part of that submission in the competition. So where are we and what are we trying to understand? Successful growth companies usually start with a minimum viable product, and then it has to evolve to become the product demanded by the market, including a revenue model. And you also need an addressable market with an engine of growth. So if you're starting in a clearly defined niche market, how will I succeed in that niche market? And then why does that market lead to a second or a third market? So it's a combination of product, market, business model, and eventually revenue. And it goes around and around in a triangle as you go through more and more different pieces that are like that. So I'd like to get into market research, and I'd like to ask Lesley to take over, please.
All right, sounds good. Next slide, please. So market research, we're going to start with understanding who your customer is, right? This is one of those first things is who do you need to be talking to? So Dave mentioned that you're going to want to start with a niche market or a particular buyer. And so the reason you're doing that is because you cannot boil the ocean. As a new small company, you need to focus on one message, one audience, and use your resources wisely in that area. And so targeting one particular customer group who shares characteristics, who sort of needs you to solve the same problem for them, has all kinds of benefits. It narrows what your product needs to be. So you don't need to have a bunch of features. You don't need to have a bunch of ways to onboard people if you have one particular segment you're going after. This also means that there's fewer people you're competing with, because if you're solving one small problem or one big problem for a small group of people, there's going to be fewer people playing in that space that you're going to have to worry about. It's also going to give you a really good capacity to then grow into your next market. So if you're really good at one market and one group of customers, then you can say, okay, who's similar to them? Who references this group? And move into that as your next segment. So you have a sort of a beachhead or a launching pad to move and grow. If you've really nailed down one market, you really understand one group of customers' pain point. And it allows you to basically become the market lead, become the product to beat much more quickly, because it's easier to capture a bigger part of a smaller market, of a smaller pie. So really focusing down on one particular segment and knowing that customer really well, knowing their problem really well, and understanding how your product is their solution. Next slide. And so the way to think about this is to think about what your value proposition is. And so this is one of your key starting blocks in the business model canvas. And that's figuring out what is the value that you're providing to which customers. What's that solution that you're providing? And the Sam Moulton's approach, which is also what I'm going to advocate for here, is whenever you don't know what an answer is, whenever you are making an assumption, go out and test that. So in this case, whenever you get confused, go to the store, the customer has the answers and the customer has the money. So that's what you're looking for. You're looking for, are you creating a problem, or are you creating a solution to a problem that people have that they're willing to pay to solve? Ultimately, that's what you're trying to get to. So does the value of your offering supersede everything that's in the market? And is it a big enough problem that people are willing to pay to fix it? So what we're going to do in this next little bit is walk through how we know that and how we do that. So next slide. And so really what we're looking at, if we're trying to sort of template this for you, is the value of testing your value proposition is knowing that you have the right answers and you have evidence-based solutions to each of these things. So who is your customer? How do you know that? Have you gone and talked to them? What's their problem? Have you asked them? Have they confirmed that this is their problem? What do they think they need to solve it? Can your product actually offer that solution? And if it can, is your solution better than anything else that's out there? And if it is, would they be willing to pay enough for it to make it worth your while? Because if it costs you $5 to make it, and they're only willing to pay $3 to get it, you're at a bit of an impasse. And can they actually purchase it and implement it? So are you talking to the right people who can actually make use of this? So these are sort of your big picture ones that if you're making assumptions on any of these items, you should probably think about doing some additional research on. So next slide. And what I'm going to give you as your overarching guiding mission is to be very humble in your research. So really the value of research is how strong you're testing and how rigorously you're testing. So you want to make sure that if you're going out and you're asking questions of, is this a problem for you? Is my product a solution for you? Would you buy it? You're not just going and asking your 3 best friends if they think this is a great idea. And of course they say yes, because they think that you're great and they want you to be happy and to support you. You want to go out and ask the hardest person who is the hardest to part from their money. Are they interested and would they actually buy it? And can you actually get their money from them? So the stronger your test is, the more reliable and the more confident you're going to be in your business model, in your value proposition, and the more impressed investors are going to be if you're looking at that. So if you can come back and back up all of your suggestions of what your value proposition is, and you know who your customer is because you've gone to talk to them. You know what their problem is because you've gone to talk to them. These are what they're going to want to see. So build it like you're right. You have your product, you have your vision, test it like it's wrong. Try and find everything that's wrong. So the easy mnemonic for this, Dave, if to the next slide, is crash test your value proposition, right? Look at this as though your paying customer is going to be in the driver's seat of this car. And you want to make sure that you've tested every assumption that you're making on your value proposition to know that it works, to know that you've tested everything, you know that you've built in the right safety things, you've put in airbags, you've done all of these things because you know where the challenges will be, you know what the obstacles will be, and you're ready with your business model to encounter each of these. So next slide, Dave. The way you know is if your crash test dummy survives, so you've done all of your research, you've looked at all of the challenges, you've looked at all the problems, your value proposition is strong, and your customer is able to step out of this car and put money into your business out of his wallet. If your crash test dummy didn't survive, that means you didn't test some important aspect of your value proposition. And you don't want to be, sideswiped by that and have your business and your dummy not able to survive. So how do we do that? Next slide. One way is to look at what you're testing. So what stage are you at? And so the example I'm going to use throughout this is the tile locator. And so this is basically, you can put it on your phone, your keys, in your wallet, anything important that you don't want to lose. So the idea is there a problem? The question you're testing, if you're looking at idea, is this actually a problem? So in this case, you'd probably go and talk to people and say, do you lose your keys with frequency? Do you need to find them? Is it important? Is this a problem? And enough people will probably say, yes, I lose things all the time. It's really frustrating. I don't know where I left my keys and I need them to leave the house in the morning. I would actually pay money for somebody to fix this so that I'm not late for my business meeting to pick up my kids, whatever it is. So in this case, we've gone and talked to people. At an idea stage, you're looking at customer discovery. So you want to go and talk to people and find out what they think. Is this a problem? Do a similar group of people share this problem? And what Tile found was that yes, people lose things all the time. Yes, people want to find them. And as long as these people all have smartphones with the right technology on it, so in this case, they needed a level of Bluetooth, they could implement the solution. So next slide is, okay, so what's the product that we need to create to fix this? And how do we test this? And so basically looking at your MVP, once you have that product, is does your product actually solve the problem? You think it does, but then you have to give it to people to test it out. So this is more user experience testing or focus group testing of you've interacted with this product, what's the feedback on it? And the test on it is, does it actually solve the problem? So are people able to find their keys and are they able to find them faster? Right, so you want to set up some sort of rubric or test criteria to see if your product succeeds or fails. And you don't want to fudge this because if it doesn't succeed and if it doesn't succeed enough, it's not going to be a valuable enough product. So this is one of those rigor things. You want to drive that car high speed into the wall right in front of you. You don't just sort of want to roll into it and tap it and be like, well, yeah, it kind of works. We're good. You really need to test that. So the next level is when you are looking at a growth stage company. Next slide, please, Dave. Or sale, sorry. So now you're selling things. So basically then you're looking at, okay, I have a product and it works. How much are people willing to pay for it? So what does the sales cycle actually look like? What does the sale value look like? And so this is where you're looking at a hypothesis of this product works so well that people are willing to buy it and they're willing to pay X amount of dollars for it. And so in this case, you can do price testing, you can do number of purchasers you want it. So this is something where you can do like a landing page of saying, we have this available, would you purchase, and measure that way. Kickstarters and crowdfunders are kind of this sort of thing in saying, here's a value, here is a product, are you willing to purchase? And what this does is then gives you the ability to say, okay, well, you have a price point and fine tune your business model and your unit economics on it. So this is the kind of assumptions of, can you afford to do this? And then finally, say we're looking at a scale stage company. So now you know that you are solving a problem, your product is good, people are willing to pay for it. Next slide, Dave, is, are you able to actually do this at scale? So can you actually make a viable business out of this because enough people will buy and maintain their purchase with you over time? And so in this case, you're looking at things like marketing, sales, processes, conversion. So your analytics, right? You're looking at what's happening on who's coming to see you, who's buying your product, are they staying, these kinds of numbers. So there's always research and discovery that you can be doing, regardless of whether you're just trying to figure out what your product is, or if there is a need for it, or if you're at the point of in-market selling and wanting to do more, better, faster. Next slide. So how do you do this? And how do I do it effectively? I will give you a couple of pieces of advice. So next slide, Dave. First is to go back to your business model canvas. So this will help you scope where your assumptions are and what you need to test. So each block clearly lays out one chunk of your business. And in that, you can identify which things you know, because you've proven you've done tests you have evidence for, and which are assumptions. And so really you want to focus on eliminating assumptions from your business model canvas. You want to know that everything is backed up. And you also want to know that if you make an assumption and you test it and you're wrong, that you go back through and see how that impacts the rest of your business model canvas. If these don't hold, all of these chunks are connected. And so you really want to use that as a tool and update it, as Dave said, so that you know where you're on the right track. So that's sort of your scope of work for where you should be focusing your research. Next slide. So then you want to come up with a plan. So again, where are these assumptions? And really think about your value proposition, because this is what drives a lot of this. Are you providing value? Are you creating the solution that your customers need? Define those priority questions, and then determine who you need to talk to and what that sort of passing grade will be. So for you, for your decision, what's the safety gear that you need? What determines for you if you've crashed that car as hard as you can, as fast as you can, into that cement wall and your customer's walking away? So you want to make sure that you are really talking to the right people to give it a strong test. You're asking the right questions to give it a strong test, and you're doing everything you possibly can to try and find that weakness. Because if you know where the weaknesses are, you can avoid them, you can change your plans, you can modify. Next slide. And so I would say prioritize de-risking, right? Test ideas early, test them often, and test the important things. If you think that there's going to be a good sales channel, how can you try this out before you put everything into it? So think of all the different ways you can crash test your car, basically, and start with the most important ones. And then also look for information to adapt your approach. So what did you learn, even if your assumption wasn't correct? What did you learn in doing that you can use to modify? Next slide. And ask both what and why. So in anything that you're doing, it's one thing to know that your car crashed and didn't make it. The important part of that is then why not? So if you talk to customers, you say, or potential customers, here's my product, I think it's great, and they aren't excited about it. You could stop there and say, okay, well, this doesn't work. Or you can say, okay, but why not? And by saying why not, or if they say, I love it, and say, okay, why, you can then use that as a starting point to either generate your next round of questions, if it was a why not, or positioning, marketing, if it's a yes, if this customer loves it or this potential customer loves it, and they say in their own words what the solution it provides for them is, you can use that when you go and talk to the next customer. So really being open to looking at your customer as a source of information and not taking rejection as a no, but as a learning opportunity. So really go out there with the ability to learn. Next slide. And now we're into market segmentation. So I'm going to turn this back over to Dave.
Great, thank you very much, Lesley. Very interesting approach and very thorough as well. So when we segment the market, you always have an idea that there are revolutionary products, segments that originate with technology or products. So mobile is revolutionary. Social media is very, very revolutionary. And then there's evolutionary products where the segment is redefined. Challenge is to refine or define or redefine the segment. So all the different versions of smartphones are evolutionary at this time. So mainstream market customers often insist that vendors fit the solution to their problem. So when you're an entrant in New Ventures BC, if you are selling B2B or even B2C, the vast majority of people or vast majority of companies are quite often skeptical, and they want evolutionary products to fit their criteria and to solve their problem the way they define it. So there's a number of different things. I'm going to mouse over this block that's here. There's a link in here which we will not play today because it's quite lengthy, but it's taking hypothesis and turning it into reality. So large companies execute in a market, startups search for a business model, they build, learn, and measure. So next is the story of Steve Jobs when he left Apple and was part of Next Computing. If you click on this one and watch it, it shows him going through all the different steps to really understand the market, make a prediction about what's going to happen, go into the market, measure the results, and repeat and see what happens again. And in this case, he is presenting an internal video to the people that work in the company, showing how the product fits the market and explaining what reality is for Next Computing back in 1990. There's another one here, which is actually Ali G talking to Donald Trump, and he's explaining why there's this huge, massive market, so therefore I'm going to become wealthy. We're not going to watch that one either because it's just a little bit more theater than we need at this time. One of the key things that it does is it tells you that revenue is not a function of market size and penetration rate. So if I have $1 billion market and I'm going to get 2% of the market and say I will get 20 million in revenue, what you're actually saying is I don't know who my customers are. I know somebody in the market will buy from me, but you're also then saying I don't know how to market to them because I don't really know which specific people in the marketplace will be there. So revenue is more a function of the leads you attract, your conversion rate, your price, and therefore individual customers. So if I look at the formula at the bottom of the slide, it's the number of leads. I'm talking to 100 people. I convert 15 of them. So I have 15 paying customers, each pay $100. My revenue is $1,500. And that's a bottom-up forecast versus a top-down. Now, top-down is useful because it tells you that there's a big market that's worth approaching. It also tells you that, let's say your company is acquired at some point in the future, that it will be acquired because a larger company is able to exploit the larger market better than a small one. So as I said before, total addressable market is valuable. It's not good for predicting revenue, but it tells you that the market is good. And you go through different steps, a theoretical market, a potential market. I get all the way down to what's my addressable market, and then what is the market demand for my product itself. Lesley alluded to the idea that there are different markets and you can migrate from one to the other. On the right-hand side, you see the bowling alley theory. This comes right from Jeffrey Moore. In other words, I go to one market segment first, then a second one or a third one, and preferably ones which recognize or reference each other so that you are able to go and understand how success in one market migrates into potential success in a second one. So a bottom-up forecast is more an idea of what are the available budgets in a market, what market reach do I have? So if I'm a small company in Vancouver, it may be really difficult for me to sell in every state in the United States. It may be difficult for me to sell a large geography. So what market can I reach? How many will attach to me? In other words, actually consider me? And what's my conversion rate? And eventually, what's my win rate? And one of the theories of all of this is that the win rate should be higher in the head pin segment. Where I go first, where my value proposition matches up better, that's where I'm going to have my best success. So the statement we get is target a single niche market segment with a must-have value proposition. Identify a market segment. Well, in this case, it says dominate, but it could also be just get into the market. How do I eventually win a reasonable market share in that segment? And then how do I leverage that leadership to move into adjacent or secondary segments? One way of looking at it schematically is the image on the top shows you have gone into the marketplace. There's an intersection between the two. It's very different than saying there's all sorts of people over there, but I'm not sure how I'm going to actually move into the marketplace, even though there's 4 different segments that have potential. So a quick poll. As I said before, Max Sailing is a sailing school. About 10 years ago, maybe not that long ago, but 6 or 7 years ago, we decided that it was also a great place for people to buy really nice looking sport clothing. And that if we sold Helly Hansen stuff, it would go really well. So we went and bought jackets out and made it available for the people who come for sailing lessons, or just in most cases, anybody who wanted one to purchase a Helly Hansen jacket via our website. So here's your poll. How many jackets did Max Sailing sell in the first year? Okay, pick one of these. Was it 0 to 10 jackets, 11 to 25, 26 to 100, 100 to 500? Maybe we could get people to answer the poll, and then we'll see what everybody thinks, and then we can give you the real answer. Has everybody had a chance to vote? What should we do, Angie? Should we go another 10, 15 seconds?
Sure, Liz actually has to launch them. So
Liz launched it. Okay,
It's
Liz,
launched.
maybe in another 5 seconds, you could put up the results of the poll, please, and let everybody have a look and see what everybody says. All right, so we have 29% think it's 0 to 10. Some thought that were modest sales. 38% felt that we were pretty good, matched up. A lot of people want to go to a sailing school to buy sport clothing. And then a fair number of people, about 13%, thought that the numbers were pretty good. All right, so I said before, one of the things to be certain about is that you actually really match up with the marketplace. I have to be truthful and tell you the answer is 2. We sold 2 jackets the first year. People don't buy sport clothing at sailing schools. We proved that not with just jackets, did it with all sorts of different pieces of clothing. So it's an interesting phenomenon. It's just like saying I don't buy pizza at McDonald's. All right, there's a number of things that are just like that. It's what are people used to. So in this case, it was not a success. And if everybody wants a deal on a jacket, I still got some in stock if you're keen. So let's move on and sort of say what you're trying to do. And the reason I brought that poll up is when you're part of a company, you're building your product, you got a number of features, you're doing R&D, you're reacting to what you hear in the marketplace, so your results are a little bit unpredictable. When you go outside and you spend more time talking to customers, and I'll admit that we did not spend a lot of time talking to customers when we went into the clothing business, you understand what customers value, you're able to differentiate your product, you understand who the head segment is or how the head pin segment behaves, and you end up with a reliable customer base. And that's what you're working towards. You want to go from an internal focus to a market focus. So if we look at how people make decisions and how behavior works, it's interesting to say that this is a couple of years ago, 81% of the worldwide internet population begins with search. And that's even higher now. So most people go and look for things. They don't all use Google. A lot of them use Microsoft Bing. There'll be a number of different search engines. There's real preference. And then it tells you what they use it for. So if you go back in time 20 years ago, you didn't have online banking. You didn't look up weather. You didn't look up the TransLink schedule. There was all sorts of stuff you couldn't do. Now, all of this is very, very common, and search is a fundamental component behind behavior of almost everybody who consumes things, and that's B2B or B2C. So when we look at the role of search in the buyer's process, there's a couple things that are important. So if you go and say, I'm aware that I need new tires for my car, maybe. I'm going to consider a number of different types of tire, a number of different stores, and then I'll make a decision at the end. And if you look at the buying process here, I go from looking at what's the problem and what's the opportunity to who's got the best solution. And then eventually one of the things, and this is very, very strong in business to business, people go with a branded solution. And it's not like, oh, buying from Microsoft is the best way to do things, but the reality is nobody ever got fired for buying Microsoft. So there's a combination of not just your fact that your product is better and has more features and is more interesting, it's how risky is it and how risky is your company. So when you look at the process for buyers to purchase things, quite often there's a whole series of steps which are all about reducing risk. When you look at larger companies, question here is how many people are involved when a B2B or a large company buys something. So here you see 100 to 500 employees, usually 6.5, 6.8, 500 to 1,000, over 1,000. The number of people involved in the buying decision increases. So the buying group, as we call it, which could be a CFO, a finance person, engineers, people who research stuff, end users, managers, all sorts of people. There are a lot of participants in the buying process. So it's quite large when you get into a large company. If you are selling to government, the numbers are even higher. Okay, government is less risk, or if they have lower risk tolerance than business. Okay, a lot of what happens in government is about reducing risk for the people who work there. Decision making takes longer, and the process is more about consultation, making sure everybody's on board and the things will work well for the people internally as well as the actual end product or end goal. So when you look at who is part of the buying process, and if you've got a product or service, there's the end user, there's an influencer, there's the person who actually buys, there's the person who decides, and there are gatekeepers. So if I look at a lot of companies, quite often an influencer, if you're selling business to business product, is an internal or external consultant, somebody who's charged with saying what type of software would be good. So if you're looking for a CRM, a customer relationship management product, and you're not sure what to do, you know, your company, you haven't got a lot of experience with them, you'll hire a consultant. They go through a whole series of products and suggest what you should do. The users are a consultant, the buyers are the managers, the decider may be the CEO, and the gatekeepers are the people with special interests. And an example of a gatekeeper would be somebody who has financial control, or someone who says, we just plain cannot afford it, or we can afford it. So there's a whole series of people involved in the buying process. Also, the concept of third-party validation. When you read a positive or negative reviews, does it influence your buying decision? And we look at this and say, has reading positive or negative reviews influence your buying decision? The answer is yes. And if you read a negative review, is it important? And the real answer is yes. Negative reviews are as important as positive ones. So if you go to websites like Glassdoor, where you get comments from people about the companies where they work, the positive statements and the negative statements are relatively important to people. So here's another poll for you. You're looking for a hotel room, and we got two questions here. When you book a hotel room, do you read the comments from past customers that rate the hotel? So yes or no. Number two, when you book a hotel room, do you insist that it has absolutely everything you want, even if it costs more? So everything, the most important things that provide value. Let's give everybody a minute or two to answer that, and we'll see what everybody thinks. So Liz, would you be able to show us results of the poll, please? So this is interesting. It's 98% say yes. And it turns out that this is one of the most common things on the internet. We read the comments from past people who've used the product, and we want to understand what they say. What's interesting is if we read 100 comments and all 100 are 5 out of 5 and they're positive and stuff, we're skeptical that they haven't deleted the negative comments. If we see a negative comment and then the hotel sort of answered back and said, sorry about that, what can we do to make it better and stuff, when they mitigate, it's even more powerful. So what you end up with is many people are buying things on the internet are looking for someone just like themselves who purchased it before. So when you buy book a hotel room, does it have to have absolutely everything you want, or just the most important things that you value? So in this case, the answer is yes, it's sort of the most important things. The message here is that when you're building a product, if you can say, there's maybe 10 features I can put in, if 90% of your customers are happy with 7 of them, you don't have to build all 10 of them in the first version of the product. That means that you have way more time, and if you try to satisfy every potential customer, your product sort of scope just gets broader and broader and broader. So let's just keep on moving here. We'll call it Segmentation 101. This is a repeat of the previous customer. You need to build every feature potential customers ask for. The answer is no. Why or why not? It's because there should be a minimum viable product that you can take into the marketplace that will meet the needs of a specific segment and allow you to enter the market and get effective customer feedback and revenue. All right. Is differentiation based only on your product? The answer is no. It's also how you operate, maybe what type of distribution you have, how you market. Do you have a second product? What are the different things that all blend together? Here's one that I would like to try to watch if we can. And we'll take a look at somebody that we know, and we'll see how this turns out.
First, there was PlayStation, aka PS1. Then there's PS2, PS3, and now PS4. And that makes sense. You'd think after Xbox, there'd be Xbox 2. But no. Next came Xbox 360. And now, after 360, comes Xbox One. Why one? Maybe that's how many seconds of thought they put into naming it.
Can you get the butter, please?
However, with the Xbox One, I can control my entire entertainment system using voice commands. Up until now, I've had to use Leonard.
Then get the other one. Pass the butter.
Hang on. I don't feel like you're taking this dilemma seriously.
Fine, Sheldon. You have my undivided attention.
Okay, now, the PS4 is more angular and sleek looking.
No way!
It's true, but the larger size of the Xbox One may keep it from overheating.
You wouldn't want your gaming system to overheat?
No, well, you absolutely would not. And furthermore, the Xbox One now comes with a Kinect included.
Included?
Yes! Not sold separately. Although the PS4 uses cool new GDDR5 RAM, while the Xbox One is still using the conventional DDR3 memory.
Why would they still be using DDR3? Are they nuts?
See, that's what I thought. But then they go and throw in an ES RAM buffer.
Oh, wait a second. Who's they?
Xbox.
You're kidding!
No, I am not. And this ES RAM buffer should totally bridge the 100 gigabit per second bandwidth gap between the two RAM types.
This is a nightmare. How will you ever make a decision?
You see, I don't know. What should I do?
Please pass the butter!
All right, I think everybody can see the sort of the message behind that. Not everybody is the same. So you're not going to get all consumers being interested in understanding all the different pieces that go into how a product works. Some people just want to know what the value is and what does it do. So one of the messages there is when you build a competitive matrix, it's more than just about your customer. So here's a sample of different ways companies compete. Who are their largest customers? What key partners do they have? In other words, what's their reputation? What's their financial health? What market share do they have? So if you look at yourself and then competitors 1 or 2 in this situation, your key products and product features are farther down. But the value proposition, sales channels, all the different things that go into what your people perceive about your product are all there. So one of the things I'd like to do is just digress into a couple of other things, other parts of marketing. And one of them is the concept of whole product. And a whole product is what your physical product or your software or your internet-based platform and all the other associated things that go with it. Could be service, could be warranty, could be training. A lot of the time, this is now considered customer success. In other words, I can sell you, my software, but I also spend a lot of time training you, making sure everything works properly in order for you to get the value out of it. And that is my whole product. And some of these things are tangible or intangible. And the idea is you're solving the whole problem for the potential customer. Examples of what it can include are consulting, post-sale service, pre-sales, hardware, all the other different things. And a lot of different factors go into it. And one of the better books, I mentioned it before, is Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey Moore. And he explains what complementary services are, complementary products, and how the potential customer gets the full value in it. One interesting example is the contrast between the whole product for a hotel for vacation travelers and the hotel for business travelers. So if you look at the business traveler, it's very quickly, maybe they'll have laundry. They're interested in a frequent flyer program. They may be arriving late at night, quick breakfast where they can go. They're busy. They're in and out of the hotel quickly. Vacation travelers, there's all sorts of activities for children, buffet breakfast, a vacation package. There's a shuttle van that'll get you around. There's a whole variety of different pieces in the value proposition and different components in the whole product. For any of you who have had kids who play sports a fair bit, my son used to play in hockey tournaments down in the US. Quite often, one of the statements in a hotel or in anything else is there's usually one very valuable proposition, one key thing which really accentuates the value prop. So if you've got a hockey team, you're picking hotel, you're probably going to be in a hotel for vacation travelers. And obviously, number one is the buffet breakfast. Okay, all the other things are nice to have. Lots of food is a key thing for that age group. So another interesting example is what's called Dunkin Donuts versus Starbucks. And we'll go back a number of years, and Dunkin Donuts thought that they needed to compete with Starbucks. And they thought, well, this is interesting. These guys are doing well. And Dunkin Donuts is the American version of Tim Hortons. How are we going to compete with them? So what they did was they took 100 Starbucks people and gave them a Dunkin Donuts card and said, go to Dunkin Donuts for a month. And they did vice versa with Dunkin Donuts people and said, here's the Starbucks card, go to the Starbucks for a month, buy coffee at a different place than they're used to. And then they debriefed them. They had all sorts of interesting comments. It was like the people from Starbucks were like, when you go to Dunkin Donuts, a lot of people were in baseball caps, a lot of Formica tables, plastic chairs, all this sort of stuff. The people who went to Starbucks and were used to it was, well, it's interesting. They've got all these exotic things, sofas. You can't even buy a small, medium, or large. And one of the best statements was, it's interesting, but it's like spending Christmas with people you don't know. But at the same time, you think, well, there are people who are really devoted to one thing and others who will switch. So if we go here and say, what percentage of people switched from Starbucks to Dunkin Donuts or vice versa after a month? So people, what do you think? Is it 0 to 5%, 6 to 10%, 11 to 25, and over 50% switched? What do people think the answer is? So let's get some votes in here and see what people believe. So Liz, do you want to publish the results and we'll see what we've got from people? Yeah, so what we've got here is we've got more answers which are in the low numbers. In other words, not that many people switch. And apparently the real answer from when they did the research was the answer was 0. So it turns out that there's 2 different tribes of people. The people that go to Starbucks in this case were different than the people who went to Dunkin Donuts. And the reason they're different is that they go for different reasons. So if you look at Starbucks, it's a little bit more upscale, maybe a little tiny bit more individualistic in some cases, but people are more comfortable in the setting rather than just, they're not comparing the cup of coffee, they're quite different experiences. So when we think about that, we have to sit down and say, how do we position our product? In other words, and positioning is what people think of our product and what we do. So your definition of positioning is, why will they buy from us versus from our competition? And another real classic definition is, it's managing the product and its presentation to fit a predetermined place in the mind of the customer. And in reality, it's a combination of market segment and competitive differentiation. If I do those two things correctly, they have the right understanding of what my product or service does. More definitions: perceived status within a market segment. So if I say to everybody, this is the Tesla of something else, people know where I fit. If I say this is the Volkswagen Beetle of something, people get another idea of where it fits. All right. So the idea is to build a relationship and communicate a competitive advantage. This is why my product or service is more effective and more targeted to you than my competitors. And this is something which is very much a marketing function. So another quick poll here. My wife drives a very safe car. What type of car does she drive? What do people think? What's the answer? So Liz, I think hopefully you've got a few answers now. Maybe you could share your screen and stuff. It's interesting. So we scroll down a little bit, we see that the overwhelming choice is Volvo. And it's interesting in that Volvo has always had a very strong reputation for safe cars. What isn't known is that they haven't won an award in over a decade for safe vehicles, but the image and the mantra that that's what they do is still there. And so it's known as a very safe type of vehicle, something that's an important feature, not just in that, but so the impact of positioning, it tells me more about partnerships. If I have really good positioning and I'm thought of as high end, my pricing can be higher. My whole product is broader. I have partners that help me with that. My company may be more valuable. It makes me blunt competition. It could reduce my sales cycle. It can do many things for me. So what we're getting around to is, how do I describe my product to customers? The customer, who do we sell to? What's their need? What do we do? Could we sell to meet our product customers' needs? How do we differentiate ourselves? How are we different? Like, how does Dunkin Donuts different than Starbucks? What's the whole product? In other words, are other things that they need? And I develop my positioning statement. So you can put this into a positioning statement criteria, and quite often this is something we suggest that companies do. But at the same time, it's not something you publish on your website. This is an internal document. And I could say, I can go down the left column and say, what are my criteria? And then I can turn it into 6-7 sentences, very straightforward, simple sentences, which have one verb and a noun and not a lot of descriptors in it. And these are the things that the statements come up with. So here is a very early positioning statement for the Apple iPod. Let everybody read that one for a sec. So the interesting thing is that Apple wrote this 2 years before the product ever came out. In other words, the positioning was built before they ever bought the product into the marketplace. We look at what an iPod would have done 5 years after it was introduced, or even today, and it maybe doesn't really make sense, but in the olden days, they cost as much as $600. So they were like the early adopters of BlackBerry. So it was for mobile high income individuals. And you go down all the different things that it does, but one of the key value proposition pieces was the differentiation of iTunes. In other words, it was easy to get the music onto the device and listen to it, even if you had to pay for it a second time. Because trying to do the old thing of copying from a CD onto a Rio or something else was incredibly difficult. Another example from Starbucks, and this goes back to the example we showed before. We'll let everybody read that one really quickly. And this is 47 years ago. This is a long time ago. So clearly, when you read this, you can understand that they're trying to redefine how people drink coffee. So it's more sophisticated, unlike they're comparing themselves to the old way of doing it with a plastic cup. And they're talking about the environment. They don't talk about the coffee itself. They're talking about the unique way of drinking it. Nowadays, one of the things they have is that they want Starbucks to be the third place, but you really are find comfortable. One of them is home, the other is work, and they want Starbucks to be the third spot for you. If you look at FedEx, what does it have? Quite often you can condense all this down into a single phrase. So if you look on the door of the FedEx truck, its tagline is "the world on time." It's not the same as the very first one. The very first tagline they had was "when it absolutely positively has to get there." Then it was "the world on time" when they became a global courier company. Now their tagline is more about being your office store all over the world. So one of the tests you can do for your product positioning is go through it and say, can a competitor's product name be substituted? And is there a relationship and a compelling reason to buy and key differentiator? So one of the things I would suggest you do is take your key phrase about your product, or even a sentence or two, and put it into Google as a complete sentence. And if it goes to the IBM website or to Microsoft's website and says this is what they say, then your differentiation isn't good enough. So just a couple more topics. We'll cover these really quickly. We'll talk about pricing. One of the issues you get often is people think they have to price low to get into the marketplace. It's not necessarily correct. If you're trying to build a high-end distinctive product, your pricing must be consistent with the other parts of the image of that product. In other words, it's a combination of different things. You can still say promotional pricing. I'll give you the first 6 months for the price of 3, but you don't have a lower price at the very beginning because it's really hard to increase your price. Also, pricing is one of the hardest things to go to the marketplace and get correct information on, because if you ask somebody, you want to pay $5 or pay $10, the answer is predictable. All right, so you can see that it's difficult to get the direct information in that regard. So you get 3 different ways of setting price. One of them is I have to cover my costs, so it's cost plus. The market is, let's say, between $25 and $40. I need to be in that range. Then the value of the product to the buyer. So my value could be way higher, but the reality is I can't expect to have my price give me 100% of the increase in value. I have to share that with the end customer. So if the market sets the price and your value is far higher than everybody else, and the pricing range is 25 to 40, my assumption is you'd probably be in the high 30s. So you may not be the most expensive, but you clearly are a premium and better product. You need to have the lowest price to compete when you're in the market? Absolutely not. Closing piece on product marketing metrics and stuff. For those of you who are going into the marketplace, there's a number of great internet tools. I meant to all bold Google Analytics. If you want to understand what's happening on your website, you should be checking that regularly. And Google has a whole series of really good free tools to help you understand traffic to your website, where people are coming from, what type of keywords they're using, all sorts of different components to it. And HubSpot itself, especially if you're a pre-revenue company, it can be relatively expensive. It's a company, it's a product you buy when you can pay for it, but they have a whole suite of really good free tools for people to use. And if you look at Hootsuite, Kissmetrics, Unbounce, there's a whole series of really good internet tools that anybody can use. You can be a clean tech company. The reality is people are going to find you on the internet. So therefore, you have to understand how to use them as well. One example is the Essential Step-by-Step Guide to Internet Marketing. It's a download from HubSpot. And it's an example of a book where, over 100,000 people are using it. It helps you understand how to market via your website. It explains a lot of the reasons why people come back to your website is the content. And how does that lead into your social media? How does that lead into blogging, all the other different things that you use to differentiate yourself? So quick question, I think this is our last one, but those of you who have a website, how often do you check your Google Analytics? What's the number? And what did you find out? Well, Liz, maybe you could put this one up as well. So the predominant answer is weekly. Some people are monthly, and there's a few people who are not all that aware. So it's really easy to go and look for Google Analytics. Just search for it. You should be able to find it. So weekly is good. Some companies will check it more often than that. So I go back to the sailing school example. We know from checking Google Analytics, we know where most of our traffic comes from. And we also know that by far our best day of the week on average is Sundays. Most people register on Sunday. I don't know why. We also know that our best day of the year for registrations for kids' summer camps is the day after spring break. And that's probably because people just don't want to relive another 2 weeks without anything for their kids to do. All right, so there's a lot of different motivations that go into all the different pieces. Common thing also is if you are selling a distinct B2B marketing product, you have to obviously understand social media. More and more companies get a lot of their traffic via inbound. People find them on social media. And the predominant tools, unless it's for something which is totally oriented towards high school kids, would be LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. There's a whole series of tools in the B2B toolkit. I'm not going to go through any of this. It's a little incomplete and there's new ones all the time. But one of the questions I think everybody should ask for themselves is which will be the top 2 for your company? And the one at the bottom is actually really important. A lot of B2B companies, there are industry specific websites, publications, or blogs that match up with the industry you're targeting. So you need to be active. You need to build visibility on those. B2B is LinkedIn. B2C can be a combination of Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And more things like Shopify are becoming better and better platforms for people to find you.
Oh, hey, Dave, someone's asking, or Tim's asking if analytics are as relevant for B2B sales.
I actually think that they are. They're probably even more more relevant. In B2B sales, you need to understand how the customer reacts to you, especially if the sales cycle is long. So if you're going to get somebody who becomes aware of you and it takes them 3 or 6 months to make a decision, you have to be able to communicate with them regularly. So analytics and understanding how they react to what you do or how they react to the latest e-newsletter you send out, the latest social media post you put. Do you get more traffic to your website after you go to a trade show? All those things are important in B2B. I think that they're very important too. And you can look at some of the validation rates that are here. So in the B2B side, it could be revenue per salesperson or employee. If I improve my content on my website, does that improve my close rate? All the different things that go into important validation metrics. How do I get metrics? Oops, this one's a little bit distorted, but there are a whole series of good companies. And there are 2 terms that I won't go into today. One of them is cost to acquire a company. In other words, how much marketing do I have to do? And then the lifetime value of the customer. In other words, will they buy from me once? Will they buy twice? Will they subscribe for 1 year, 2 years? What are the different things? So if you're a successful company, quite often people will stay with you longer and longer. So the lifetime value of your customer continues to increase. So a couple of rhetorical questions. You know, how many of you have product that sells itself? The answer is almost nobody. That just really happens. And if you don't have one that sells itself, how will you spend your marketing budget? It's a really important thing to look at, because you can't send it or spend it all across the board. And going right back to segmentation, where do you focus? So final suggestion is for each segment, identify which method you will use. Will I go on LinkedIn? Will I rely on the content on my website? What will I do? Prioritize each method for each segment, and then create a little bit of a budget for each segment. One of the questions you have here is how many segments will you target initially? And I think Liz did a final poll. Yeah, we've got one. And we'll just get, maybe Liz, if you could publish the results of the poll, that'd be great. Okay, so we get a lot of people saying number one or number two. Maybe because I put the footer on the page is that if you're trying to do more than 3, you're fired. You just don't have enough money. And if your 2 segments are men and women, 2 is not a good answer either. Okay, so you have to be very selective with how you segment the market. You have to be very targeted with what you do. So closing thing, and this comes from a venture capitalist, you know, what type of company you're building. If you have a really good image of that at the beginning, it makes it a lot easier to execute. So most startups turn into a small business. They don't scale super well, or they do scale well. Most of you can figure out what your business model is. They're not going to be disruptive to the stage where every time you put in $1, you get more than 10 back out. And every single one of them will market via the internet. That's something that's really important. So, and his comment was, you know, if you build a lifestyle business that has $5 million in revenue every year, you're doing pretty well. So there's a lot of different ways of measuring success. It does not have to be based totally on getting investment. Some great books to read. Jeffrey Moore, we mentioned before, The Chasm Companion, and then Steve Blank has a couple of really good books. 4 Steps to the Epiphany and the Startup Owner's Manual is good. Startup Owner's Manual is a big, heavy-duty book. If you have insomnia, it's a great cure. One thing I would suggest, though, is has some real nuggets in it, and when in doubt, read the last 5 pages of each chapter. It's got all sorts of stuff in it. And it helps you understand everything from first customer to first market, users and revenue to target marketing. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I think hopefully I haven't talked for too long. We've got a bit of time for Q&A. Everybody else, anybody's thoughts or anything that I've said? Lesley never would have said anything confusing. I confuse people regularly. But there we are. Lesley, is there anything you'd add to what I've sort of talked on about in the second half?
I don't think so. I mean, I think the only thing that I would say is to, you know, using analytics, figuring out where you're going, collect all of that information and refer to it when you're making decisions. So use that as part of your planning, part of your evidence. So all of the stuff that you're doing, even if it's not specifically research, can go to inform your segment, your product, your customers, your sales.
All right, well, if there are any questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can put your hand up on Zoom and you can ask it yourself. So while people want to do that, I'll just remind you of a couple of things. Our seminar series continues next week. It'll be next Wednesday on pricing, introduction to pricing with the folks at Ibica. So please join us for that. It'll be Wednesday at 12:30, same online place. Our networking event is this Thursday. And again, on our website, newventuresbc.com, if you want to join us for a drink and a in-person conversation. And we will send out a survey and a link to the slides and the video after this. So you'll have all of that. And if you have any feedback, please do complete the survey. It just takes a couple minutes and really helps us plan for future sessions. So with that, I'm seeing lots of thank yous here. So thank you, Dave and Lesley. Thank you. Anyone else have any questions, or have we answered them all already?
So Angie, how about I answer one more question? I ask one more question.
Okay,
So one of the things we talked about is, and Lesley said it very, very well, explained customer discovery. We're now coming out of COVID, at least that's the assumption. I think we're all a little pretty happy to not be wearing masks everywhere and a bunch of stuff like that. One of the statements we hear now is that the world has changed. There's no doubt that it's changed. How many of you have done rediscovery? In other words, gone back to people you talked to a year or two ago, gone back to potential customer stuff and asked them questions again, ask them how much things have changed. So just put your hand up if you've done rediscovery. And if you haven't, it's something that we really suggest you spend some time doing. Go out and see what they think of, because people's understanding of risk, people's expectation about the future are changing. So rediscovery, in other words, it's also a great way to have, oh, by the way, I'm still here if you're interested in my product conversation. So rediscovery, all right, do that. We think that that's something you should really look at.
yes, customer discovery never really ends, is I think what most entrepreneurs learn. There's always
Absolutely.
rediscovery. So, all right, okay. So I think we will give everyone a few minutes back to their day. Thank you again, Lesley and Dave, for sharing all your expertise. There's lots of events coming up at Venture Labs, so please do look up SFU Venture Labs. And otherwise, hopefully we'll see you all at future events.
Okay.
Okay, thanks
Good to
everyone.
see
Have a great
everyone. We'll
afternoon.
see you later.